Christmas art wasn't always twinkly lights and cherubs. In fact, the earliest Christmas imagery is filled with demons, omens, violent symbolism, and winter folklore creatures that would terrify modern audiences. On today's episode of Unstill Life, we're unwrapping the dark and bizarre history of Christmas art, the stuff that greeting cards definitely don't want to show you. Christmas art is supposed to feel warm, right? Snow, candles, angels, a baby in a glowing manger, but if you peel back even one layer, you realise something surprising. Christmas imagery has always had a dark streak running straight through it. And honestly, it kinda makes sense. For most of human history, winter wasn't cozy, it was dangerous, it was hungry, and it was cold. The solstice marked the longest night of the year, and people filled that darkness with ritual, superstition, and a very healthy fear of the unknown. So when artists painted Christmas, they weren't painting the holiday we recognise today. They were painting a world where survival felt uncertain, and where light was meaningful only because everything around it was so dark. Early Christian artists leaned into this. Their imagery fused spiritual hope with genuine dread, ruined buildings crumbling behind the Holy Family, skeletal winter trees, blackened skies, animals that stare a little too directly at the viewer. The message wasn't subtle. Christmas was a miracle happening inside a world that looked like it was falling apart. And even as centuries passed, that tension never really disappeared. Christmas art kept its shadows, sometimes literally in the use of deep chiaroscuro, sometimes symbolically through omens, demons, and moral warnings. The version of Christmas we know today, the bright, glittery, very sanitized version, is actually the exception, not the rule. For most of history, artists used Christmas to explore contrast, light and darkness, birth and death, hope and fear. So before we get into Krampus, pagan mythologies, and the creepier corners of holiday folklore, it's important to remember, Christmas art was never innocent, it just got edited. So to start, let's talk about Krampus, because nothing says Merry Christmas like a giant goat demon sprinting through the snow with a bundle of screaming children on his back. And the weirdest part? This wasn't some edgy niche subculture. People used to send Krampus postcards, like literal holiday cards. Imagine opening your mail and instead of a snowman you get a hairy long-tongued demon licking his lips like, hope you're being good this year. Krampus comes from Austrian and German alpine folklore, and visually he's complete chaos. Artists in the 1800s drew him with backwards goat legs, hooves, chains, a wicker basket for captured children, and always this insanely long tongue, like he's auditioning for a metal album cover. And these weren't horror illustrations, they were festive. They'd say things like Gruß von Krampus, which basically means greetings from Krampus, as if that makes the whole kidnapping thing fine. But here's the interesting part. Krampus wasn't drawn to be purely scary. The art has this bizarre, almost playful grotesqueness, like the artists were in on the joke. He's threatening, but also a bit goofy. And that reflects on the mindset of the time. Winter was rough, people were cold, hungry, and dealing with darkness for months. So they created these folklore figures that balanced fear with humour as a kind of psychological coping mechanism. Plus, let's be real, telling your kids Santa is watching is one thing, telling them behave or a giant horned creature will drag you into the night is an extremely efficient parenting strategy. But visually, Krampus art shows something deeper. Christmas wasn't just a celebration, it was a negotiation with the darker side of winter, a way of saying that they acknowledge the scary stuff and they're laughing at it too. So yeah, long before Mariah Carey defrosted every year, Christmas was basically a monster movie, and Krampus was the star of that show. Okay, let's get into one of my favourite parts of Christmas art history. The holiday is basically a remix. Like, if Christmas were a Spotify playlist, half the songs would be stolen from older cultures and rebranded as festive classics. Because before Christianity took over December, you had Saturnalia, you had Yule, you had all these winter solstice festivals that were loud, chaotic, and extremely not church approved. And here's the thing artists knew. You can't just invent a new holiday and expect people to vibe with it. So early Christian painters were like, okay, we'll borrow a bit of that, blend it a little, nobody will even notice. Spoiler, we noticed. For example, evergreen branches, holly, wreaths, and mistletoe. These aren't originally about Jesus at all. They were symbols of life surviving through winter, used in pagan rituals long before the Nativity ever got painted. But artists slipped them into religious scenes because they already meant hope and endurance to the audience. Then there's Saturnalia, which was basically ancient Rome's version of a chaotic office Christmas party. Feasting, gift-giving, role reversal, even masters serving their servants. And when you look at medieval Christmas feasting art, tell me it doesn't look suspiciously Roman. Half the time the Nativity feast paintings look like early influencers doing a soft launch at a banquet. And let's talk about the sun, because before December 25th became Christ's birthday in art, it was already the birthday of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god. So a lot of early Jesus imagery, yeah, it just looks like Sol. Same rays, same pose, same glowing halo, even the vibe of the winter light, the whole a tiny spark of hope in the darkest time, that existed in pagan solstice art for centuries. Christian painters basically took the symbolism and made it about a manger. So in a way, Christmas art, or Christmas itself, isn't just Christian. It's this beautifully messy collage of ancient fears, rituals, mythologies, and seasonal survival strategies. Christmas didn't erase pagan imagery, it just repurposed it. Let's shift onto the nativity scene. The Christmas image that's supposed to be pure, sweet, and wholesome. Babies, animals, Mary glowing. The whole thing feels like it was made for a Christmas card. But then you actually look at the historical paintings and they're dark, like really dark. Artists weren't painting a cozy barn with fairy lights, they were painting a moment of hope happening in a world that looked apocalyptic. Let me explain. Most Renaissance nativities are full of ruins, cracked walls, collapsed pillars, broken temples, and it's not because the artist couldn't draw a nice building, it's symbolism. The crumbling architecture represents the fall of the old world, the death of paganism, the collapse of order, basically a welcome to baby Jesus and showing that everything around him is dying. And then there's the lighting. We think Christmas art is warm and golden, but a lot of early nativities used that strong chiaroscuro which I've mentioned so many times before. The dramatic shadows where you can only see the characters because a miracle is apparently doubling as a spotlight. It's gorgeous, don't get me wrong, but also very ominous. The darkness isn't just aesthetic, it's theological. Light is divine. The shadows represent the world without salvation. It's quite literally the darkness before dawn. And the symbolism doesn't stop there. Some paintings include bare, dead trees, others show birds that symbolise death, or lambs foreshadowing Jesus' future sacrifice. There are halos, but there's also a weird amount of tension. Like, everyone knows this baby isn't just here to cuddle. He's here to die for humanity's sins. And a lot of nativity artists included tiny visual reminders of that. Even Mary sometimes looks worried. Not in the modern gentle mother way, more in the I know where this is going way. One of the most intense examples I can name is Caravaggio's Nativity with St. Francis and St. Lawrence. There is zero sparkle. It is almost bleak. There's muted colours, deep shadows, a real sense of heaviness. It feels like the entire world is holding its breath in this painting. And that's kind of the point. The Nativity wasn't portrayed as a cozy Christmas moment. It was a sacred event happening inside a broken world. Hope, yes, but only against the darkness. So next time you see a sweet modern nativity set at a garden centre, just remember historically, the vibe was not cutesy. The vibe is this child will save humanity and everything around him is an omen. Next we have the Victorians, the people who gave us lace, tea culture, train stations, and Christmas ghosts. Yes, if you've ever wondered why A Christmas Carol feels strangely spooky for a holiday favourite, it's because Victorians fully believed that Christmas was the season for ghost stories. Not Halloween or autumn, Christmas. Imagine gathering round a fire, snow outside, the room lit only by candles, and instead of reading sweet family stories, everyone just talks about a man that died on Christmas Eve. That was the norm. And artists loved it. Victorian Christmas art leaned into that cosy darkness. This beautiful blend of warmth and chill. Illustrators weren't afraid to make spirits look genuinely disturbing. You have looming shadows, chains, skeletal figures, half-transparent ghosts with sunken eyes, all placed right next to festive holly and snowflakes. One of the best examples, definitely the early illustrations of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Now we're used to the cute Disney-fied versions, you know, the Muppets, the Jim Carrey one, whatever. But the original 1800s illustrations, those ghosts are terrifying. The ghost of Christmas Yet to Come looks like something out of a horror novel, a literal faceless shadow that just points accusingly. Marley's ghost is wrapped in chains like he was drowned in a bank vault. Even the ghost of Christmas Past, the one that's supposed to be gentle, is drawn as this strange child-adult hybrid with a burning head. It's kind of ethereal, but also very abjectful in the way that I don't want to look at it, but also do at the same time. But here's the interesting thing about this. The spooky visuals weren't meant to ruin Christmas. They were meant to intensify it. Victorians saw winter as a time for reflection, a moment when the veil between life and death felt thin. The year was ending, the days were short, the nights were very long, so storytelling naturally leaned towards the supernatural. And within that context, ghostly Christmas art served a purpose. It made moral lessons feel bigger, bolder, and impossible to ignore. A Christmas Carol isn't just about Scrooge being grumpy, it's about confronting your past, witnessing your present, and being haunted by your potential future. And Victorian artists amplified that moral weight through dramatic, chilling, unforgettable imagery. So while we think of Christmas today as this soft, sugary thing, the Victorians celebrated it like a gothic novel with good lighting. And honestly, I think they understood the vibe better, because what's more festive than a warm fire, a cold night, and a story that reminds you to be a better human? After all the demons, pagan gods, ruined architecture, and Victorian nightmare ghosts, we have to answer the big question here. How did Christmas art go from creepy and symbolic to sparkly cartoon reindeer wearing scarves? Because somewhere along the timeline we went from here's a demon who steals children to here's a cookie with googly eyes. So what happened? A few things, and they all tie into one idea: commercialization. Christmas got commercialized. Starting in the late 1800s and exploding in the 20th century, Christmas shifted from a spiritual season full of symbolism and reflection to a family-friendly, marketable, gift-buying extravaganza. And creepy imagery is not very brand safe. You can't exactly sell toys using a Victorian corpse ghost. Okay, well, maybe you could now if you've got a few gothic babies here and there, but back then, definitely not. So companies cleaned up the visuals. Krampus was pushed out, the dramatic Nativity art got replaced with soft-glowing, Pinterest-safe versions, folklore creatures were rewritten to be cute or removed entirely, and then came the biggest artistic rebrand of all, Coca-Cola Santa. Before that campaign, Santa was drawn in all kinds of ways: tall, thin, spooky, elf-like, even a little chaotic, tricksterish, but Coca-Cola wanted a friendly, cuddly, universally appealing character, and once that image caught on, the entire holiday aesthetic shifted towards comfort and joy, visually and emotionally. But the real twist, I hear you wonder: after World War II, people were done with darkness. They wanted optimism, stability, sweetness, so artists leaned hard into cheerful colours, soft edges, and wholesome imagery. Christmas became less about confronting the winter darkness and more about escaping it. And that's how we ended up with the current vibe of Christmas cards, and Christmas art in general. It became cozy, bright, sentimental, and very safe. But here's the thing I love: the darker, older imagery never disappeared. It's still there, lurking under the surface, in folklore, museum pieces, old postcards, or dusty corners of European archives. And honestly, I think it makes Christmas richer, because it adds depth and reminds us that the season was once about surviving the darkest times of year, literally, and that the sparkle only means something because there was always shadow behind it. So modern Christmas art isn't wrong, it's just incomplete. It's the glossy top layer of a holiday with a much darker, weirder, way more fascinating artistic history. So I'm gonna say it first. Commercialization didn't just clean up Christmas art, it kind of ruined it. And I don't mean that in a grinchy way, I mean it in a creative way, because historically Christmas imagery, it was very symbolic. It was weird, layered, emotional, slightly unsettling, and incredibly human. Artists were exploring life, death, rebirth, survival, mythology, all woven into these deep, moody visuals. But as soon as commercialization simplified it so a 3-year-old would recognize it, suddenly the complexity was gone. You can't sell a product using a nativity that grapples with mortality. You can't put a demon on a cookie tin. Well, you kind of can now. But corporations did not have the range back then, so the market did what markets do. It streamlined everything into one universal, digestible aesthetic. Red, green, snowflakes, and a chubby Santa. Christmas became a logo, an instantly recognizable product identity, and when that shift happened, the emotional and mythological depth disappeared. So the art became cute, safe, and repeatable to use every single year. It's not that contemporary Christmas art is bad, it just no longer helps us process darkness, or mark the solstice, or face mortality, or honour myths older than Christianity itself. Unfortunately now, it's just about consistency. And honestly, that's why I think making this video and revisiting the weird, sort of creepy, symbolic Christmas art of the past feels so refreshing. It reminds us that holidays weren't always about shopping carts and branded jingles, they were about storytelling, all the things good art is supposed to hold. So after wandering through the very tip of the iceberg in regards to demon folklore, pagan symbolism, crumbling nativities, and Victorian ghost stories, I think the strangest realization is this: Christmas has and always will be deeper than the glitter. The holiday survived for thousands of years not because it was cute, but because it meant something. It helped people face the darkest nights of the year, it held fear and hope in the same hand, it honoured cycles of life, death, light and shadow. And honestly, I love that more than modern Christmas art, because when you look at older Christmas art, the weird stuff, it feels alive, it feels very honest, and it feels like humans are trying to make sense of winter in the only way they knew how, with stories and symbols and beautiful, unsettling imagery. And maybe that is why the modern, overly sanitized version feels a little empty. Not wrong in any way, but just very hollowed out of emotion. And maybe as society, that is what we're craving now. As artists, as viewers, as people, is the honesty again. The complexity, the strangeness, the shadow that makes the light meaningful. So if you take anything from this episode, let it be this: there is beauty in the darker side of Christmas, and there always has been. Thank you for wandering through it with me, and if you would like to support an artist who clearly spends way too much time thinking about ghosts and pagan symbolism, I do have prints available in my shop. They help me keep making these videos, so thank you to everyone who's grabbed one already. I am wishing you a magical, art-filled, wonderfully weird holiday season, and of course, a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next episode of Unstill Life.